Hi, my name is Chris Beal. I'm the Executive Director with the Vineyard Team. We are a nonprofit grower group whose mission is to promote sustainable vineyard practices. Our group has been around since the mid-90s. I've been with the group since 1998. Before that, I worked at Cal Poly and worked at ITRC. We appreciate this opportunity to share a little bit of information about our project and share it with the students. As a little background, we do research and education, tailgates, podcasts on sustainable farming practices. And over the years, we've done lots of projects relating to irrigation and water and technology. And we've found that growers are just kind of in a different place in terms of where they are with technology. We've had things where we've had technical assistance, we've helped people with equipment, we've helped people with education, and the results were mixed in terms of whether or not people would adopt practices over the long haul, or really sort of what their acceptance or resistance were to some of these practices. So that's how this project came about, because we have this idea that if it were really all about information or technical assistance, then everybody would be handling their irrigation systems differently. So with that, I figured that there were more people factors involved with some of these decisions. So today we have Craig McMillan and Jacob Hernandez. They've been working on this project with us. And I will go ahead and hand it on over to Craig.
All right. Well, a few years back, we, as Chris mentioned, we realized that growers are coming from different places. The question is, well, what places are they coming from? So we wanted to look at what people's irrigation practices were and see if there were differences and see if we could find kind of groups of people. And if so, what might open them to change and what might be holding them back. This is called the Agricultural Water Best Management Practices Adoption Project. It was funded by the Department of Water Resources. And what we did is we offered free distribution uniformity evaluations to folks on one of their irrigation sets. So that was a real incentive, and it was also one of our metrics. And at that time, the grower answered a questionnaire and was interviewed about their irrigation practices, but also about their values and beliefs and some scientific knowledge. We thought there might be some things that motivate people, so we might be able to identify in their values. We then made recommendations for best management practices that they could implement to improve their DU scores. And then we offered free technical assistance for 2 years. And we had a group of growers that took us up on that, and many growers who surprisingly didn't. Over the course of the project, we evaluated 57 vineyards in 3 counties, San Luis Obispo, Monterey, and Santa Barbara counties, and completed 55 grower interviews.
So I'll pick it up from here. This is Jacob. So what we did again was we were using the methodology developed by Cal Poly Irrigation Training Research Center, the Distribution Uniformity. And what that does is it gives us a value between 0 and 1, 1 being the best, of how well an irrigation system essentially is performing based on how evenly pressure and water is distributed throughout that system. And so the way that one could identify these potential problems or the score is by taking a series of observations and measurements starting at the pump station. So just like we learn in irrigation water management at Cal Poly there, I took the same class you guys did, and so start at the pump, look at pressures, look at filtration systems, what type of systems there, what there's a VFD there, what are the pressures when the system is operating. We want to see pressures at pump discharge and before and after filters. And then we take that out to the field and we're looking at pressures at block valves and then at different locations throughout your submains or your laterals, drip hoses, whatever the system is consisting of out in the field. Then we will also take flow measurements. So we do that at certain locations as well. And we're looking for basically what is the variability of pressure and flow in that field. So that's going to give us a number of between 0 and 1. And anything between 0.9 and above is going to be considered an excellent system. So most systems are going to be designed for a 0.92 or better, and hopefully with good practices, or we'll talk about how to maintain a system at that level. And just to further categorize things, 0.81 to 0.89 is good, and then anything below at 0.8 is considered poor. And this is all for a drip micro irrigation system. A sprinkler or a furrow system is going to have different DU numbers associated with those rankings. And so for our 57 project growers throughout all 3 counties, the average was a 0.78, and based off other similar projects, I know that that's very similar to what other people have found. So a 0.78 is what we're looking at. You just kind of see the distribution there. Definitely most of the growers are operating at a 0.80 or less, 24 out of 57 in this case. We're operating below. So now we're kind of go into looking at what are the reasons, or kind of more what that really means for the growers. So you know from the water destination diagrams and the irrigation techniques that you're learning, we're really striving to apply a certain amount of water per acre to a field, and DU really plays a lot into that because that's what you're shooting for. So if your DU is at a 0.78, 50% of that field is reaching what your desired target is, but 22% of that field is receiving more or less. So anything that you can do to improve DU closer to 1, and really like 0.92 is probably more achievable, but I've seen 0.95s in the field as well. So we know that it can be done, and that will, then you're only using less than a 10% in that area, so that's probably more achievable for people. So how and why is kind of the question that we also wanted to answer, and hopefully we could figure that out. So what the DU breaks down, the evaluation breaks down the problems for us, so we can see what is creating the degradation in distribution uniformity. Most cases, pressure problems and some other problems is how the ITRC program, what that calls them, but other problems are going to be manufacturer variation, but mostly plugging. So plugging from debris, plugging from chemical precipitates, biologicals that are getting into the system, past the primary filter, and causing problems downstream somehow, some way, usually resulting in degraded emission device performance. And so you see, kind of with our 57 growers, about a quarter, 27%, all that was pressure problems. What this is actually, out of all 57, looking at the problems of DU, how much of the problems of that 78, of that 0.78, what was that coming from? So and the majority of that is coming from plugging problems, and that's usually just due to practices that aren't being performed properly, or maybe the grower's not aware of a problem that they are having. Unequal spacing typically can be, a grower has 2 emitter types or different row spacing in a set, so that really can throw off an evaluation in a bad way. So that's really important, is to have the same flow rate, the same spacing in a set. And then unequal drainage is topography, which is more of a problem here on the coast, not so much in the valley. So talking about those problems, what we also can do is offer solutions, recommendations, BMPs, to address those problems. So like I said, pressure regulation, having good pressure, whatever that pressure is. I don't know, that all depends on your engineer and your original system design. But having the adequate pressure to meet the minimum of 8 psi at the furthest emitter is really the key, because anything above that is wasted electricity, wasted pumping costs. So meeting the lowest pressure needed to meet the minimum pressure in the set is really important. And so having good pressure gauges that actually work is really important. A lot of times I go to the field and those are old, damaged, not working, or unreadable in some way. And so replace those every couple of years, because that's really important when they do get damaged easily. And having them at pump discharge and before and after your filter. And not only before and after the filter, but having some kind of automatic back flush system on that primary filter is really important. It needs to work off of a pressure differential so that when those filters are too dirty, they're cleaning themselves out on a regular basis. And then having some kind of regular maintenance on that filter is really, really important, and Craig will talk about that. Having a good flushing practice is super important. Almost every grower we talked to said, yeah, we flush our lines, our drip hoses. We do it annually, or maybe if they felt better about it, they did it before and after the season. Based off of what we saw, that's probably not enough. The lines are still dirty when I open up the end and see what's coming out of them. I collect it in a sock, and there's still a lot of debris material coming out of the end, or emitters are just not performing properly. We remove some of those, break them open, see what's inside of them. There's obviously debris and stuff affecting the performance of those. So flushing, but also on top of flushing is what am I putting into that system that's causing that problem, and what can I do to treat it? And typically, that's some kind of water analysis to identify if it's a chemical or biological problem, and then attacking it with some kind of remediation if you can, or if you have to replace drip hoses and emitters to get back to where you need to be, then that has to happen. But then following it up with some kind of continuous treatment seems to be a very effective way of maintaining a high DU score. We've seen that. And so I'm going to let Craig go ahead and pick it up with kind of wrapping this all up and how making sense of some of the data that we've collected with our interviews and field data.
Well, some of the things that you might expect we didn't find. So right off the bat, we thought, well, the older the vineyard is, the greater the degree of disrepair, and the more wear and tear there would be on the system. So those should have lower DU scores. And when we looked at the big picture, we didn't find that to be the case. It was not a strong statistical correlation between system age and DU score. And we also found the same with manager experience. We thought the more experience a manager had, the more problems they've solved, the more time they've had to work on things, and that maybe that the experience played a role in having a higher DU score, but that again wasn't the case. So there's a lot more going on there than some of the things that seem to be obvious. Things that we did find associated with higher DU scores was managing irrigation water for leaching, which is pretty interesting. That's not something that you would think about on the surface. This is about controlling how much water they put on so that they only watered the root zone, which means they had to have some knowledge of what the water holding capacity and what the drainage capacity is like of their soils. Folks who reported that they had that kind of knowledge, that they did irrigate to avoid leaching, they tended to have higher DU scores. Having a system for identifying problems, that's a simple thing, but it definitely turned out to be the case. Folks that had a very formalized way of having folks in the field and identifying issues and coming back and reporting them, and having plans in place. So like making sure that the irrigators in the field had the tools that they needed to make repairs when they found them, and that those repairs were being reported back so that the managers knew, oh, we're continually having a problem with, so they were able to then take maybe a little broader view. So it was not just simply enough to drive around in the field and look for leaks. You have to have a way of actually coming back and reporting those to management and to work with a team, the irrigated working with a team to solve those problems. We found good filter maintenance was another thing that was associated with higher DU score. And we mean pretty aggressive maintenance. A lot of folks said, yeah, we maintain our filters, we backflush regularly, we backflush when there was a pressure differential. What we found though is there were some folks who went to a greater degree. For instance, they would actually take the screens out of their screen filters and pressure wash them. And that did a great job of getting the screens back to kind of a base state. Same thing was true for checking the sand in filters. A lot of folks didn't investigate the quality of their sand media filters. So taking a little extra steps beyond just simply backflushing made a huge difference. Again, another one that didn't seem to be obvious was folks that were using evapotranspiration rate as part of their irrigation scheduling. That was just a question that we asked as part of our general interview, but we found that it turned out to be important. We would only be guessing as to what that means, but there definitely is a connection there between being a little bit more sophisticated and taking evapotranspiration into account and having better DU score. And then another one that on the surface it's hard to see what the mechanism is, but it definitely was a correlation, was converting irrigation hours into acre inches. Folks that looked at their irrigation water in terms of irrigation inches tended to have systems with higher scores than folks that didn't, for whatever reason. Now we looked at values in the idea that how much people place importance on different things will influence where they place importance on their irrigation behaviors. We didn't know what those might be necessarily, but we knew that people's motivations presumably would influence their irrigation behaviors. And we didn't find that there were correlations between growers' values and their DU scores. What we did find was that there was definitely a profile. There was obviously a lot of variation within, but as a whole, we put it all together and looked at it. Grape growers were a little bit open to change. They're not closed off. They're not stuck in their ways by any stretch of the imagination. They're open to new things, but in a very kind of small way, not in a big crazy way, which makes sense. If you're farming, you have to be able to adjust. You have to be able to try new things. You have to be able to take things into account, but you can't be just going off open to any old thing because you got so much risk involved. Similarly, growers were very open to other people. They were very other focused, is what it's called. They tend to prioritize others over themselves, which again, when you think about the job, it makes sense because you're working with people. So if you're not open to other people, you're gonna have a hard time managing, a workforce. So generally, a very nice group of people that were open-minded. And then in terms of environmental values, we found that grape growers were moderately environmentally minded. Again, there was results all over the place, but in general, there was a real close grouping around moderately environmentally minded. So again, they're very concerned about the environment, they're concerned about resource conservation, but not to the extreme. Then we've done some retests of growers, and so far the retests we've done on systems, the DOs have gone up, I believe, which is good news. One of the ideas behind this was that if people get a touch, if people get a nudge, if there's some contact you have with folks, that'll change their behavior in a desired direction. And that seems to have been the case on a macro scale. So when folks came to the project, they got their things, and then they did something with it. Is kind of what it appears to be. Jacob, you want to take it from there?
Actually, I want to weigh in just a minute here because there's
Please.
kind of a lot of nuts and bolts here. So Yeah, so, you know, when we look at DU, we're looking at kind of the physical system, right? And so I know I was a little, and the reason we started this is we wanted to identify some of the sociological or people components, the people factors with changed behavior. So, because again, we've been doing this work in the Vineyard Team for a long time. We have meetings, we do education, we do self-assessments, but like, how do people actually change behavior? And we know that sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And so we really wanted to get back to the people factors of that. And that's what we were really trying to measure by kind of doing these different surveys. Yes, we did all of the irrigation surveys, which is really interesting and which is what we've really always done. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of the kind of work that we do. But we also did the people side. And me going into it, I really thought, okay, we're going to find really a profile. We're going to really see how people divide out based on their values and beliefs. And based on retesting these people after time, we're going to be able to see who actually implemented the changes in their system and if there are any predictive factors in that. And it was very interesting to me that it wasn't necessarily as predictive as we thought, that we didn't see as much difference in the types of people that we thought, that they weren't plotting out differently in terms of their values and beliefs, which shows me that in general, in the wine grape community, we have kind of a certain kind of grower, and we're probably skewing for this kind of grower. The other thing is, you know, sometimes there's mobile labs out there doing work, and they do the evaluation, they do the report, and they send it off. The way we handled the reporting back to the grower, the feedback loop back to the grower, was very, very, very different than how some other mobile labs are doing it. So, and I think that's really important because there was very much kind of an interactive conversation about the specific, really explaining the different aspects of the results. And that, I think, might be the really interesting thing about influencing behavior, rather than just emailing a report to grower, doing a hand delivery with an explanation of that report. Because we did find that people were changing, that a lot of people adopted the things that was suggested by the report, and we're kind of happy to do that. You know, we had a lot of people that were very engaged with this project. The last thing, sort of back to the system side in terms of hardware. So we're, you know, like, of course, if you have good filter maintenance, you're going to have a better DU. And of course, if you have a system for identifying and fixing irrigation problems, your system is going to be in better shape. It's going to have a better maintenance program. But what was interesting were the other kind of water management side around scheduling, about if you're actually kind of recording your information and converting it over to acre feet or acre inches. And what that showed to me, that it was kind of it's a whole thinking about water. So if people are thinking about how they're recording their irrigation data, they're probably also thinking about these robust kind of maintenance programs. And I know we've had some conversations internally that, you know, maybe Aegis system wasn't huge. We thought we were going to see big difference in the counties, because counties have different kind of reputations in terms of their farming practices. We didn't really see that. But I think there was really kind of a cultural issue within the organization that could predict kind of how they were handling their water management and what that looked like in terms of how they were communicating to their employees, what systems they had in place, whether they had the right size emitters on hand, right? So those are just my 2 cents on recapping on this slide. So, but I'll hand it back over to Jacob. Hang on, let me unmute you.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you guys are saying there. Just the most striking thing to me, and just to kind of reiterate that last point on the slide, is the factor, the nudge idea. It's something I really incorporated into my business model, is to just let the growers know that you're in this together, and that I think what we did was we sat down and we talked to the growers and we interviewed them first, and we asked them about their systems and about their practices. And so as they told us these answers, and as we met with more and more of these growers, I think we were able to kind of put together a picture of, okay, well, this kind of leads to this, or this kind of goes along with this. And so we were able to maybe make some kind of distinctions between that management capability and what the grower or irrigator is able to implement on the ground is really important. So that communication and that is really important. And so going back to that retest and that nudge, is we thought that the control group who we didn't talk to would just stay static or not do anything, but we saw some very big improvements in that group. And so it's just, it's not that growers are not doing something or not having a system. It's just maybe they don't have the time for it. There's other things that are more important. As long as that water is reaching the plant the way that it's supposed to, they're happy. But maybe they're just not aware of. Kind of going back to one of the things that we're not having on here is that water quality. If a grower did not report a water quality issue, then they had a lower DU score sometimes. And so just having that, they might not have been aware of an issue that they were having, so they weren't doing anything to correct it. And so you have to be aware that there's a problem before you can act to fix it. And so having the DU evaluation as part of a regular evaluation on your property is just as important as a pump test or anything else that you're doing in your system, water quality analysis or anything else. So it should be a regular evaluation to see where you're at and to see where you can be or what you need to do to stay there. And so that kind of wraps it up. We appreciate it. I'll throw it back to you guys.
Yeah, we really appreciate this opportunity. For those of you that are interested in wine grapes, I would encourage you to just sign up for our email. We send it twice a month. There's podcasts and articles and videos and things like that. Our website's at vineyardteam.org. And yeah, if you have any questions about the project, you can reach out to us. So thanks for having us.